So good morning, good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're from. Again, my name is Mark Dunkel. My email address is below. So this is the first recording webcast of our Microsoft Education Partners webcast series. My email address is at the bottom, so if you have any questions or feedback, either during or after the webcast, please let me know, and you can contact me directly. I'm also joined by Jason Masterman from Udesic and Michelle Salazar from K2. And today, this is the inaugural Microsoft Education Partner webcast. And what we wanted to do from a customer perspective is there's a lot of education customers out there using SharePoint in thousands of different ways, whether we're talking about research or a medical center or at a school district. There are a lot of different ways that folks are using SharePoint today, and what we are trying to do is increase that awareness and that exposure for the very many different types of solution scenarios that people are using SharePoint in education. So this is the first webcast series of many that will be coming in the upcoming months. And we also wanted to increase the education partner awareness. We have in SharePoint we have over 5,000 partners, and many of those partners create very rich education solutions that we want to kind of make you aware of, that they're currently out there to maybe facilitate your needs and your goals. And of course, at the end, we will do some Q&A. So as far as the ability to see this full screen in the bottom right-hand corner of your link client, you can click a little icon, and that's going to give you a full screen, and you can see everyone's presentation without issues of anything being cut out on the side or anything like that. As far as the Q&A, you can use the Q&A panel directly within Link, or you can verbally ask a question, but we request that you ask those questions near the end of the presentation just to make sure that Udesic and K2 can get through their content. So with that said, I would like to introduce Jason Masterman from Udesic to talk about how they worked with education customers around the area of research.
All right, thanks so much, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'll go ahead and start sharing out my desktop and wait for that to come into full screen mode. All right, so hopefully you guys should be seeing this. So the first thing we'll talk about is taking a look at SharePoint Server in higher education. Again, my name is Jason Masterman. I'm with Udesic, the general manager here for our portals and collab practice. Briefly, the agenda that we'll walk through on this portion is, how is SharePoint being used in higher education? What are some of the example types of applications that we've built for higher education? We'll then take a look at a particular case study, a faculty research portal, and some of the interesting things that we've done there for a particular university. And at the end, we'll talk about a little bit more about how to better leverage the platform. A lot of customers that we've talked to over the last few years that have worked with SharePoint and put it in place, there's just a variety of things that you can do with the platform. So understanding what all the options are and how to really take advantage of it are some of the things that we've become really proficient at and really good at helping our customers get focused and delivering their solutions on the platform, as opposed to having just another platform that doesn't deliver on the promise. So it's very important to have some proper planning in those things. So we'll take a look at how to go from the beginning to the end on building those solutions. So a little bit about Udesic. We're a national systems integrator and gold ISV partner. We're in the top 10 Microsoft national systems integrators. The way we like to think of it is we're a pretty small fish in a really big pond when you get to the top 10. So though we're national across the country, we're still a pretty boutique shop compared to a lot of the guys that are at that top 10 tier. We have about over 1 million hours of SharePoint consulting delivered, if you can believe that, from the first version of the platform. Delivered lots of SharePoint engagements across the nation, several in higher education and even K through 12 environments. So we have deep product group relationships with folks at Microsoft. Lots of our staff are actually from Microsoft, have either been there before, left Udesic, gone back to Microsoft, and joined back into the team. So we have a lot of people that are deeply involved with Microsoft at the product level and very engaged, which is very helpful with our customers and figuring out how to plan for what portion of your budget should you allocate to building these solutions when maybe the next release or some of the versions might do some of the things that you were looking at investing in. So really strategic planning. A little bit more about us, and then I'll get into the other details. We're actually broken up across a couple different areas. We have our core consulting services, which is really the bread and butter and the heart of the business. But instead of being a one-legged stool, like a lot of the consulting services companies, we have product that we also have developed and sell. Probably one of the more popular pieces of product technology that our customers have seen over the last year is a product called Pulse, which really speaks to a social platform. So very excited about that. And then we have our managed services piece, where we actually do hosting and management for our customers. So quite a variety of options. We do more than just SharePoint. So we have, the Portals and Collab practice, custom app dev, business intelligence, the whole Microsoft focus, and we're 100% focused to the Microsoft platform, and been very excited about that since the beginning of the organization. All right, so looking at SharePoint 2010 applications in higher ed, looking at the uses of SharePoint and how some of the customers that we've worked with in higher ed education have taken advantage of it. There's a variety of ways to take advantage of the platform, from working with just small groups inside your faculty or research departments to managing student profile information across the whole entire campus. Business analytics and dashboards, those types of things that maybe might be done at more of a research level or even in the administration section. Grant submission funding and tracking expenditures. We've worked with some universities out here on the west side of the country dealing with just grant submission and funding, which was a really interesting piece. And how to track those things that from the moment that they start submitting for receiving the grants, from the process of receiving the grants, and then the accounting process that tracks and manages those expenditures through the use of all those funds. So it can be a variety of areas where you see SharePoint as a platform being brought into education, right? It's not just a learning management system by any means, right? There's so many things you can do with it. It really depends on what it is that they're trying to target. Compliance can be a big piece. We also have a records management aspect. We've partnered with Gimmelsoft, which allows us to provide one of the only certified DoD 5015.2 solutions on top of SharePoint. So when you look at some of the requirements around managing government grants and the paper trail for those things, we have a solution that speaks to that, which is a very unique opportunity. SharePoint in K through 12, clearly it's not just for higher education, right? I have two kids in school, 11 and 13, and when I look at the amount of interaction that we can get with the school system today, daily feedback about what my kids are doing in school, how they're doing on tests they took this morning, or in the afternoon, the minute the grades are posted, we have that information. So the amount of collaboration that's expected today in the educational space, not just in higher education, but in the K through 12 space, we're seeing all over, right? So the involvement and the expectations from the students, through the executives within the Board of Education, everybody's looking at better ways to collaborate, measure, have metrics and accountability, and get that deep involvement. So, we absolutely see that in not just higher education, right? Right now we're working with Microsoft and the Chicago public school system to bring about the change that they're looking to do in that school system. So it's exciting. Definitely a lot happening in both higher and K through 12 space. So some of the higher education institutions, right, it's not just local community colleges, not just state colleges and universities or Ivy League schools. The solutions that we've been working with for our customers are across the whole gamut. And why is that? right? You have to, when you look at SharePoint as a platform and you understand what can be built on top of that platform, and you look at all the opportunities that are there in the SharePoint pie, it just meets the needs in a variety of ways. So it makes sense that when they understand what's available out of the box and what we can do, whether it be with search or records management, document management, workflows, a variety of things, it really just gives us opportunity to take this platform and all that infrastructure and then tailor it to the specific needs for that particular institution and what their goals are. The one case study that I want to dig into here is a faculty research management tool, and this was a really, really interesting solution, and took some time to put together. It was very involved. I'm only showing a short portion of it here today, but it's built on top of Microsoft SharePoint 2010, and it serves as a repository of profiles, all the documents, the metadata for a university, reflecting all the research and work that's going on inside that institution. And then it allows that information to be, shared not just within the university and the administration staff or faculty, but external on their public website. So it provides, a single point of access for creating content, walking through all the people that are involved in producing that content, all the way through publishing and surfacing that back out to, business sector, public consumption, internal consumption throughout the university. So very involved. When you think of a lot of universities and the value of what they bring, it's so diverse in so many different ways, but there's so much research and content being produced. Having a really good way of managing and tracking that is absolutely core to the amount of information that's coming out of the institution. So having a good system for that is what was put in place. The challenge in that case is if you looked at the initial requirements and said, what is it that we're trying to track and manage? There's a large volume of content that gets produced, and when you start to dig into that content, you'll find that it has a lot of different forms, right? And trying to break down, what is unique about this type of content, or whether it be a published article, a book, or a specific set of chapters for that book, whether it be a working paper, a presentation that's actually being put together, then the teaching and training material around that. As you start to try and decompose the thing into all of its various pieces and capture the relevant attributes and metadata to put that system together, there's actually a lot there. As we start working on it, right, and building that content, or as the university authors and staff are putting that content together, how does the rest of the organization know when it's ready to be consumed, right, when it's done, what the status of it is, who the key authors were that worked on the content, and then at what level it can be shared, right? Is it internal? Can it be shared externally? So there's a lot to put one of those systems together. So this is a really successful endeavor, and spans across the whole university. So one of the things that we found in working with a lot of our customers and building these types of systems is it's amazing how if you think of IT in the organization and putting a platform like SharePoint in place, when you put the platform in place and you look at all that it can do, a lot of the solutions that you're buying when you see SharePoint and you say, here's the platform, here's the solution that I saw, I want what SharePoint has to offer, and we bring it into a university or an organization, and it gets installed and stood up. The first part of putting that platform in place is great, but if it's just managed by IT, internal and controlled by IT, and we stop at the point of standing it up and putting it in place, saying all these things that it can do out of the box, it'll just happen magically, it's not the case. As much as the platform can provide a tremendous amount of opportunity, we still need a good vision. We still need a good plan. So we spend a reasonable amount of time with our customers putting together a user experience to understand what the system's going to look like, how the user interactions are, and getting that concept clearly mapped out, the user stories and all the key elements put in place with the actual users. And a really important part of that is you want to have a system that's adopted, right, and drive that adoption through all the important layers of your organization, or your university, school system that's trying to take advantage of this. So if we don't have involvement from the beginning and we go sit in a room and build these systems in isolation, they're never going to get the type of adoption that's needed, especially as you deal with very diverse groups that span locations, regions, the hours of the day, cultures. You have a large audience that you're trying to target with a lot of these systems. So getting that high-level adoption requires a very interactive upfront design process that really gets their involvement from the beginning. So that we found that to be a very critical component in driving success and really getting the adoption out there. So in this case, some of the wireframe, one of the wireframes you're seeing here around creating a particular content and an entry for that type of content that's going to be entered in there. So what the publication status is, in this case if it's a periodical, who the authors were and the contributors on it, taking somebody through the experience of more of a wizard from the starting point of entering in some core attributes and then moving through that wizard to capture all those pieces of metadata, and then once they're done publishing it and having it approved to go out to the rest of the world for consumption. Pretty good experience, again allowing them to stop and save at any point in that process. But in this case, these were some wire diagrams that were built up front before it was actually implemented into the platform. And then as we went to putting that into SharePoint and actually driving it into real screens that worked in the environment, in some cases it looks like SharePoint, in other cases it doesn't. But whether it's featured works, a biography for a particular person, right, faculty member, the research that they're doing, teaching interests. We have access for that information for them when they log in and their whole entire profile, and then any of the content that they're trying to add into that system. So in this case, a pretty heavy investment from the university to make this system to capture all that content and be delivered, right, wizard style in this case to capture the information. But again, you can see here, right, titles, the contributors that are involved in adding different contributors, publication, periodicals that are involved. And I've had to blur out some of the names for this particular university, but anyways, you can still get an idea of what was being put together. We also did some pretty interesting customizations in terms of the ribbon at the top here and customizing this experience, still taking advantage of that look and feel for Office and SharePoint that they have to offer, but tailoring it to meet the specific needs of this application. And allowing them to group different content into different structures, whether it be books, right, published articles, unpublished presentations, right, case materials, etc. So this is a very extensive system that manages the content for the enterprise, all built on top of SharePoint 2010. And taking advantage of the rich metadata experience, the tagging that can be available, leveraging all the search, fast search experience on top of it for finding that content and information afterwards. And again, reaches across the whole, university. Keywords, taxonomy, and search. Right, as you put content into any system, for those of us that have seen customers or seen installations where they didn't have a plan and they started using SharePoint without a plan, it can end up in some cases as more of a glorified file repository. So we don't want that, right? We want the experience to be really good content that gets captured with the key tags and attributes. So that we can find it and search across it in really useful and meaningful ways. So here's just an example where as the research is going in and we have some summary information that we want to capture on that, we can tag it with some keywords, topics, geographies, and industries to really allow that information to be a little bit more useful on the back end when we're searching for it. So fun stuff in that regards. One of the things that I really like to say to customers is they're looking at SharePoint as a platform and understanding, that once we have, if we have the licenses for it with our server license or our EAs, owning the platform and the tools alone won't get you there. It's a great start, but you got to have a vision. You got to have a roadmap. You need to have a plan for how you're going to get the system that you want, the solution that you want built and put in place. And when you start to sit down and look at all the different things that need to be addressed inside an organization, where do you start can oftentimes be a challenge. So we know we have the platform. We know that the platform can solve a wide range of application needs. So how do we start to drill in and figure out which ones are the key ones to deliver it, to give us the best values? So how do you know what's the most important problem to solve when you're building the systems? How do you choose that right application? It can be a very difficult decision. Performing a deeper cost-benefit analysis really often reveals or helps in many cases justify why you can't afford not to invest in that system. We have, today with the economy the way it's been, we have many customers that have had a hard time getting budget to build the systems that they want to put in place because they look at it and they say, we just don't have the funds to put these systems together. When you go in and sit down and you look at what they're spending on maintaining these systems that they were planning to migrate off of, the software support costs or just the staff to maintain those systems, and you really look at the cost of not doing anything and the benefit and the time savings and the value that you would get by investing some funds into building that solution, what you can often show in numbers by spending a little bit of time is how they can't afford not to invest in the solution and the systems that they're trying to build. So we've been working with a lot of our customers to do that type of analysis on the front end to help them really get a ranking across their solutions so that they understand at a deeper level what the cost benefit is so that they can justify putting that system in and how it's going to benefit not just everybody that wants the application, but really save them some money moving forward. So there's again, a little bit about what's happening with SharePoint in higher education, some opportunities in K-12 with Chicago Public Schools. One example of one of the systems that we did for a university where we're managing really, some of the most valuable content that an organization, like a university, puts together, and all sitting on top of, this great, very flexible platform called SharePoint. If you guys have other questions or want to reach me, here's my contact information with Udesic, address and phone number, email, all right there. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over back to Mark and then over to Michelle.
Thank you, Jason. And so you can see here you can use SharePoint for a variety of different ways. So SharePoint right out of the box provides a lot of value. When we think about the type of solutions, people are creating degree audits on this. They're capturing lectures and they're returning that to their students. We have parent portals and alumni portals, a lot of business intelligence content. So there's a lot of different scenarios, and this is a great research area that is going to certainly resonate with a lot of institutions that are out there, particularly in higher ed. So with that said, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the link bar, or you can ask verbally at the end. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Michelle from K2.
Great, thanks, Mark. I'm going to go ahead and share out my desktop here. You'll just let me know when you can see it.
All right. It's loading now.
How's that coming through?
It's loading right now. I'll let you know when it's finished. There you go.
All right, great. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Salazar, and as Mark mentioned, I'm a technical specialist here at K2. And today I'm going to introduce you to K2 and look at it in a different way about your processes and how K2 can be used to automate those processes while leveraging SharePoint. So I'll quickly just go into a quick introduction into K2. We'll talk a little bit about how K2 can help in higher education, specifically looking at different processes. And as we all know, there are many processes within the education environment. We'll look at a quick K2 solution example. This is just an example of potential processes that can be leveraged and automated. And then a summary and Q&A real quickly. All right, so K2 is essentially a platform for building workflow and process-driven applications. This platform allows users to really easily create workflows, and depending on the type of skill sets you possess, whether you're a business user or a technical user, it provides you those tools depending on those skill sets to build these processes. So if we think about all the processes that occur in higher education, some may be automated already by third-party software or even homegrown applications or none at all. And again, K2 really allows you the ability to become sort of that glue, if you will, to integrate with those existing applications as well as the ability to create new processes, automation tools for that. Now, we are enterprise class workflow, and what that essentially means is through the K2 platform, you're able to integrate into your existing systems. Again, you may already have systems in place that do some of these workflow and automating processes, but really you can integrate with that and pull that information into other processes or as part of an integrated process or workflow throughout the organization. So if you have those third-party and homegrown systems, continue to use them, not trying to replace them, but essentially provide you the tooling to enhance those processes and go across your organization. Now, K2 is also built on top of the Microsoft platform, and we integrate very deeply with Microsoft, specifically around SharePoint, and that's what I'm going to show you today is some of that automation and how to leverage SharePoint to manage that as well. Additionally, on this slide, we're also seeing different areas where you can use K2, and really that's to show that K2 is not process specific. And what that really means is you can use K2 across your organization, in this case in higher education. So if you have processes for students requesting information, that application process, financial aid, sometimes those processes all interact and intermingle together, whether I have to send tasks to different users in different departments to finish out that application process. And again, if you start thinking about K2 as that glue between those processes, you can really leverage and start automating and bringing that all together and making it a really efficient admissions potentially process. So here are some of the tools within K2 real quickly. K2 Black Point is K2's tooling around the SharePoint environment and allows you to really build robust processes leveraging SharePoint and around SharePoint. Black Pearl is our flagship product, which again allows you that full platform for automating processes around SharePoint, as well as extending beyond that, so you can go into those existing systems, etc. And then K2 Connect, which allows you to integrate with things like SAT, if you will. So let's talk about the dream. What is the dream? And these are typical requests made when asked about automating processes. You want processes that are fully automated, smooth running, easy to understand. You want to make sure that the processes that you're building convert to your company or your university's strategy and culture. Even though we all have the same admissions processes, those could have different strategies or different steps in those processes that make it a little bit more complex. You want to be enabled to work faster with fewer mistakes. And when you automate the process like that, there's less task or less complexity for users to make mistakes when entering information. And of course, offering that full auditing and reporting capability. So you want a tool that not only automates your processes, but also allows you to visualize and have some visibility into that process as it's running. So how can K2 help with that? The number one thing is to eliminate paperwork errors and confusion. Imagine, if you will, if you have an admissions application being submitted, whether that's by fax, manually, someone hands that in, or even emails that. Being able to pull that into the system automatically, kick off workflows to get that process in place. Reducing workload and decreasing turnaround time. Potential great applications might get missed due to the department not seeing or reviewing the files until a deadline has expired. So instead, maybe auto-escalate that process or that step based on the deadlines that are currently set. And again, regardless of where that process is, whether it's in the financial aid department, admissions, etc., being able to auto-escalate processes, does that mean send it to a higher level of approval, a reminder email saying we need to get this done before the deadline expires? Increase visibility. Think about retention. Sometimes staff is spending so many hours managing Excel spreadsheets and creating mail merges for sending communication for students. Instead, maybe spend time contacting those students who haven't re-registered yet and learn why. So again, visibility into not only seeing the processes as they're occurring, but what kind of reporting are we getting out of that? You know, why aren't students re-registering? Automate the process for sending out that communication as opposed to having your staff spend hours on that. And then, of course, and finally, bridging and extending Microsoft and other technologies that may exist in your infrastructure. So again, reiterating back to that platform effect and allowing you to integrate with your existing systems to pull that information together and build out those processes. So let's take an example. We have student admissions and enrollment. And again, this is just a typical, maybe a standard checklist that goes through for or when a student applies for enrollment or even inquires about attending a university. There's a number of tasks set for if they're undergraduate. If they're an international student, they obviously have to have their TOEFL scores, as well as the affidavit for financial support. And again, multiple checklists depending on the different areas. This could cross lines between IT as well as through financial aid. So if we look at this checklist and how time-intensive this might be, using K2, you can kind of break that complexity into logical steps and then automate. So we see all those different steps taking their own place in different processing steps. So we verify the information coming through. Maybe I have different processes depending on the type of student they are, a new student, graduate, international student, and each one of those processes. And you can kind of see here, we're starting in one process, calling out to a sub-process. And then maybe we have a review of documents. Maybe we have to wait for all processing steps to complete before we continue on to the next step. And then finally uploading that document or the documents related to the student. Any fees collected, and again, kicking off either other processes or sending tasks to different users. And again, our simple checklist or our complex checklist turned into something a little bit more simplified in the fact that we can separate those into different steps within our process. What kind of processes are we talking about? What can we automate within the education arena? So you can see our little lotus flower here showing some of those different areas from outreach, enrollment, IT interests, whether I want to do system access, create help desk systems, administration, facilities management, faculty management, and then obviously nurturing. You want to make sure you're watching that student progress from the time they inquired about the university as well as final graduation and beyond. And for example, you can do things across different departments. So if you have a student that maybe wants to enroll in a class that becomes overloaded or that falls in the overloaded category, wouldn't it be great to see all information for that student in place, so all relevant information required to make that decision? Are the appropriate prerequisites in place? Maybe professors have submitted recommendation letters on his or her behalf. How do we know that those exist? Or quite possibly, the GPA itself merits approval. Being able to see that all in one place, and again, leveraging SharePoint to do this, to show all that information that has passed through a process, whether it was from the internal inquiry into the student, the GPA, the recommendation letters. Are there any holdups in tuition? So querying that finance department, making sure that everything's set on that area. So all this information may come from different systems, and typically there's a swivel chair effect. I'm checking emails, I'm sending emails, I'm making phone calls, checking other systems to make sure that I can make this appropriate decision. So again, you can see the number of areas we can cover inside of processes, and it's because K2 is not process specific and allowing you to integrate among different processes. So what are some of the artifacts that go into building the process? And I'm not going to go into in depth into each one of these, but these are the different components that encompass building a process that allow you to do things like use SharePoint lists to manage different thresholds potentially. Maybe there's an escalation or a deadline that gets set and it changes throughout the quarter or throughout the semester. How can we manage that without having to potentially call IT to update that? Where does that information come from? Again, the integration with the different systems that you might have already in place to pull that information together. Policies. Are there articulation agreements in place where we have transcripts? Do we need to actually go fetch those, or can we take a look at that articulation agreement and make sure those transfer correctly? So again, a number of processes that get involved in building, or a number of steps that get involved in building those processes. So let's take a look at a quick example. Now this example is a human-to-human and human-to-machine process. So I can interact with different people in my department, so tasks getting sent directly or auto-sent. Human-to-machine, meaning I'm going to approve a specific task or make a change to something and it's going to update a system. It can integrate into existing inquiry, admissions, and enrollment systems. So again, if you have those in place and you just kind of want to integrate those together. K2, again, can work across many processes. And really, once IT skills, K2 skills, and not necessarily IT skills are leveraged, you can use those across other processes. An example of this scenario, and again, a very simple scenario. A prospective student inquires about attending, admissions applications, we're all familiar with this, sent to financial aid, student housing, we then make sure we get our student ID and parking permit. All those scenarios that come into place might be separate processes or encompassed in one full process. Now, the benefits that I'm going to show you from the K2 perspective is the creation of a unified work area for each student. So we go to that one unified work area, that placeholder that has all transcripts, the GPA, any scheduling, any comments that each user, regardless of what process they were involved in, can see in a single view all activity, information, and correspondence surrounding that student. Automatic task allocation, allocated to the correct department or team member, depending on the different policies or rules that have been set in place. And finally, the visibility into those processes. KPI information. Is this student's information, are they progressing throughout the life cycle appropriately? Are they in green status, red status? Do we need to actually escalate this up? And then finally, detailed reporting around what's going on in the performance and line of business information. Here's a quick checklist of some of the integration portions that K2 is integrated with Microsoft. InfoPath forms, that forms perspective, Active Directory, SharePoint list forms, SharePoint Server, Exchange 2010, etc. So a nice list of some of the integration points with K2 in getting this higher education task together. So maybe we start with that inquiry. This is what a potential inquiry might look like. Again, it's a very simple process. But what you get here is a customized drag and drop process flow, graphical view of the current step, process notifications, SLA escalations. So if the deadline is approaching, make sure that this is actually occurring. We want to make sure we can forward that and upload that into a different user if necessary. Once we approve all this, or once the student comes into the system, we can have an automatic site provision. So again, that unified work area put in place in SharePoint, which is something that might look like this. We have different, at the top level, different areas to kick off the new student inquiries, admissions, enrollment. And again, these can be automated, so they might not require manual interaction. Maybe it's coming from a form that has been faxed in and kicking off the same process. We also can see some tracking where we are in our current processes, as well as detailed student tracking. So I can click on each of these items and go into a detailed list of, for a specific student, where we are in the process. And again, at admissions process, same kind of functionality with the addition of parent-child processing, so calling out to that IT department to grant system access depending on what classes they're taking. Maybe they need access to the CS department to take that computer class. Got that detailed unified workflow where I have all our process comments. Again, this could be comments coming from multiple processes, all in one unified work area. The ability to action different steps or different tasks depending on what step we're on in the process. Do we want to cancel the enrollment altogether? We can see student information being all displayed in one place. We have what semester we're in, the GPA, what degree we're applying for, and then the progress. We can see the different progress the student has come through as they've attended the university. A nice KPI, a visual indicator indicating where we are in that process. And then finally, if we have any interviews set up with our advisor, we can see that in a calendar view, very visual, all in our unified work area here. And of course, any paperwork, those recommendation letters, the transcripts that have come through, the admissions application, all in one place. We don't have to swivel chair. We don't have to send emails. We can see it all in one place. We can see the comments that have been made by the different departments as they're processing the students. So really what the benefit is again, those smooth running processes, fully automated, easy to understand. We saw everything we needed in one unified place inside of SharePoint. We didn't have to swivel chair, make phone calls. We could see it all in one place. Utilizing technology that we're familiar with. Again, if we want to use things like Excel spreadsheets to manage certain criteria, K2 can query that Excel spreadsheet. And again, it's really about automating that so you can spend your time where it needs to be spent as opposed to doing those mundane tasks, enabling users to work faster. And again, mapping to the strategy, process, and culture of the institution. Everybody's got a different process. There's one step in that process that's always very different. But again, being able to automate that and use existing systems that you might already have in place. So again, that's just kind of the quick little overview that I wanted to give with K2 using SharePoint to build processes and around the process applications. And here's just a quick slide on some contact information if you want more information on K2 and leveraging SharePoint, as well as partnering with someone like Udesic, which has a great skill set with K2. There's some information, as well as the Try Now website, so K2.com. You can actually sign in and get access to K2 and try that out as well. All right, Mark, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you, Jason, for sharing with us some of the solutions that you have. Now, again, I wanted to reiterate. We're going to go to the Q&A now, but I wanted to reiterate the point of our Partner Education Webcast series is to really grow awareness to the wonderful things that are happening throughout all of education in both K through 12 and higher education. We'll also be doing a customer webcast series to grow that awareness as well. There are some fantastic things that people are doing out there, as you saw today, around research, around process management, which is so important to education, and being able to run just a variety of different processes throughout the different schools and departments and all institutions across the United States. And people are doing this today, and a lot of folks just aren't aware of that. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and open this up to Q&A. I wanted to also give you my email address one more time. We are going to do many more of these webcasts, so if there's any particular areas that you as a customer would like to see, please make me aware of those, because these are all really tailored to what you would like to see and growing your exposure and awareness to what is being done out there on the SharePoint platform. The fact that SharePoint can handle not only the documents, not only the announcements and the communications and team collaboration, which is powerful in search, and web content management and those things that people initially think about, but when you see solutions like this that facilitate collaboration around research, when you see solutions that facilitate all these different processes that are so important to education, you begin to see how powerful the SharePoint platform is as people begin to build and grow with it. And so with that said, again, that's my email address. I just want to prop that up real quick, and then I just want to pop off back here to our link client and make sure that we're answering whatever questions that you may have. So if you have any questions at this time, please feel free to post those, or you could speak those if you wanted to just speak verbally. Michelle, while you're presenting, there are some folks down here that would like the copies of those decks. So if you want a copy of the deck, you can either reach out to Michelle or Jason directly, or please, Dwayne has left his information. So if you wanted to send him the deck, that'd be great.
Hey, Mark. I think the participants are in the mute audience mode. So I'm going to go ahead and select that option to unmute. So if anybody wants to come in, let's see. Yeah, so now they can, anybody that wants to unmute themselves and ask questions verbally should be able to. Or type them in, whatever you're most comfortable with. We sure appreciate those of you that joined, taking the time to join us today.